Hi, so welcome back to Football Further. What I wanted to do to talk about in this video was what it's like to have a football agency through the pandemic. It's been almost a year now, so I thought it'd be a great way to talk to you and talk about what we have to do within a football agency through COVID and all the things that have made it difficult to be successful and to keep being successful through such a difficult time in football. So football stopped, I think, back in March 2020 and didn't come back until June. So there were no fans during that period. There's still no fans, and hope that they're back in soon. Games still being cancelled now, cancelled last minute with COVID through failed tests or whatever it might be. The full financial impact is yet to be known. But I believe KPMG did a study that suggested in the top 5 leagues, they were likely to lose 4 billion in 2019-20, and that 10 billion would come off the value of players. Instead, I think it's not been as bad as they forecasted. So recent forecasts have estimated a loss of maybe 4 billion over the 20 top leagues instead of the 5. And for over 2 seasons instead of the 1. So it's worth remembering also in that 4 billion is from a projected revenue of perhaps maybe 45 billion. So it's around 10%. Obviously the top level clubs are going to be able to deal with things a lot better than the smaller clubs. Lower clubs that are dependent on match day revenues will obviously suffer the most because their loss through gate revenue, the footfall that comes in and pays for their tickets. This is vital to some of the smaller clubs in the smaller leagues. So they're the ones that are going to really struggle. The big clubs will lose revenue, as we've just talked about. Maybe not as much as projected, but they'll get through it because their gate revenue, season tickets, is only a small percentage of their whole revenue. So how has that affected us in the agency world? So when football stopped, it gives players an opportunity when they're at home. They weren't playing football, they weren't training. It gave them an opportunity to see what life was like without football. What we did was to make sure that players have kept up on their paperwork. It sounds boring, but wills, insurance, or all that general paperwork that players didn't do or didn't find the time, or it was difficult to do whilst they're playing week in, week out. I made sure that they get on that quick and they fill in and do those forms whilst they were sat at home. And I think what it also do is made them think about what they wanted to do after football. Because sitting there understanding with no football, when that's taken away, it gives you a glimpse into that life. So it made players think about what career they want, what their interests are, what they want to do with themselves after football. There's a few players that took up hobbies, and some that took courses, online courses. That was a really interesting thing for them to do whilst they had that time. Us as an agency, we had to make sure that you check in on your player more, the mental health side of it, the mental well-being, making sure that they're good, that they're coping with what's going on. During the bad times, this is where they really need to hear from their agents the most. I generally say that through injuries, not being in the team, not playing, those are the times that as an agent you need to be in contact with your player the most. When the player's playing every week, he's scoring goals, they're playing well, that's the easy conversations, but you really need to check in on your players when times are bad, and during COVID they have been bad, and players have been on their own, and those are the sort of times you really need to check in on them. Also speaking to landlords for a few of the players, just checking, see if there was anything we could do with sort of the rent, or make the agreements, making sure that things were okay. We had Sometimes some of the players didn't have facilities to train, so that was difficult because gyms were closed, obviously weren't allowed in the clubs. So it was trying to train and keep some sort of level of fitness. There was obviously the contract discussions around wage deferrals, reductions, variations in contracts. So that was a difficult time because some clubs were trying to do things, trying to get other things done or slip things into the contracts. So it was a time that we had to be really careful with what players were signing. Also commercial partners, some commercial brands, some brands were going through some really difficult times. So there was some renegotiation on commercial contracts, on terms and payments, etc. So had to really be on the ball as that on that side of things as well. So it impacted everything around the footballer and everything around what the footballers do. COVID and that period of time that was really, really difficult was really busy. Busy doing things that you wouldn't generally do when everything's up and running. So it was a period of learning and reacting quick to certain situations. So now that football's back, how is it affecting us as an agency? So using tech, using data to make sure that you keep watching games, because obviously we're not allowed into games, we're not watching live games, and keep communication with players as often as possible, as we've talked about, because you can't see them in person. It's very difficult with all the stuff that's going on with lockdown to be able to go and see them personally and spend time with them or take them out for dinner as what we would normally do, I would normally do. So that's important to do. With recruitment, trying to find clients, trying to sign clients, trying to do deals, it's difficult when you're not allowed to, as we talked about, we're not allowed to go and see a player. So, it's a lot of Zoom meetings, it's a lot of phone calls, not allowed to go and watch players live. So going back to the data side of things, so watching games on software, to make sure that you're trying to sign the right sort of players that fit the agency. Had to do presentations over Zoom, which is always difficult. Signing a player to an agency, a player is making a real commitment and trust to you as the agent, and that's hard to develop that trust, or for them to get a real feeling of you when it's just Zoom, phone calls, video chat, whatever it might be. It's really difficult. I always want to get in front of a player and build that trust and that relationship that then makes them feel comfortable giving us the commitment to join the agency. So how's it affected revenue? It's been a difficult time for agencies as well. So clubs have tried to renege on agency payments because they don't have the money, or whether it being deferred or then having to go to lawyers. It's been a difficult time for revenue, but deals are still getting done. They may not be at the larger level that they used to, but deals are still getting done, and we continue to work hard for the summer. We've also had to, it's been an interesting time to check rep agreements with players, agency agreements with clubs. So that's been a real time for us to reflect and check on all those contracts. Clubs can use the current situation as an excuse to if you're doing new deals, to try and offer less money to a player. It can be used as a bit of an excuse, so you've got to then really do your research as to what they can afford, what they can't afford, in order for you to be able to negotiate the best way that you can. As we talked about, the super wealthy clubs, the top clubs in the Premier League, it may not affect them as much, but they'll still be frugal and they'll still use COVID as an example, as an excuse to try and negotiate that a little bit harder. It was also worth mentioning about the extra expenses and during COVID through the agency. So whether it be software, subscriptions to try and keep on top of things, or expenses with regards to extra things that you might do as an agency. So, one of the things that we thought would be best to help our players through not just COVID, but going forward, was we're now working with a top sports psychiatrist. So one of the offerings that we have now is that our players, when they sign with us, or existing clients, will now have an opportunity to speak to a top sports psychiatrist. Some have this from the club, some prefer to speak to people outside of the club, but we felt it was important and a good support mechanism from us as an agency to be able to offer our clients that. So that's something that's come out of COVID for us. You know, what this opportunity has given us is that we can look internally and think how to make yourself better as a company. That was just one of the things that we did, and better as individuals as well. You know, I've been in this for a long time, but always continue to learn. You never know everything. Many think they do, but you know, you've got to continue to learn. You've got to continue to educate yourself in order to be able to give the best representation to your client. So whether it be a course on negotiation, or whether it be an executive business course, whatever it might be, you know, we've really used this time to try and develop not just the business, but to develop as individuals as well. So yeah, that was a little insight into how an agency runs through COVID and the problems that we've all faced and had to overcome. If you have any questions, then please get in touch. We've got our website, www.footballfurther.com. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. Hope you found that valuable, and see you in the next video.